Bienvenidos. Welcome everyone to Farm Workers Betrayed. Chicana and Latinx feminists speak out on César Chávez abuse. My name is Norma Gallegos. I'm a member of Radical Women and speaking to you from the lands of the Yelamu Ramaytush Ohlone, also known as San Francisco. And I just wanted to let you know also that my ancestry, my grandfather, and my paternal grandfather was a farm worker who came to the United States via the Bracero program during the 1960s. I am also a member of the Comrades of Color Caucus, which is made up of members from both Radical Women and the Freedom Socialist Party. And I am also today's chair. This event is hosted by National Radical Women. Radical Women is a socialist feminist organization founded in 1967 in the United States. We have been part of many fights for Chicano liberation, defense of women of color, and immigrants, and much more. As a multiracial working class feminists, we take seriously the sexual abuse by United Farm Workers leader César Chávez and provide this platform to bring to light the truths, the analysis, and justice for survivors of the sexual abuse. So check out our website and get a copy of the Radical Women Manifesto. We'll have that in the chat. So just to start the program, I'll give a brief overview of the issues, and then we'll have our four speakers. Unfortunately, we had four speakers, and one of them, Juisa Jimeno, will not be joining us as she is ill today. It'll be followed by open discussion that I will moderate, and then there will be closing remarks by the speakers and end with announcements. Does that sound good for everybody?
Yes.
All right. On March 18, the New York Times published an article documenting reports that the United Farm Workers icon, César Chávez, had sexually molested and raped young girls and women. UFW co-founder Dolores Huerta, now in her 90s, also came forward to tell of being raped twice by Chávez in the 1960s, which resulted in 2 children. Almost overnight, a polarization occurred in the Chicano farm worker community between those who stood for the victims of the sexual assaults and those who denounced the survivors and denied any wrongdoings by Chavez. California's Governor Newsom quickly signed into law the renaming of March 31st from Cesar Chavez Day to Farm Workers Day, and many cities are considering renaming parks, schools, and street signs named after Chavez. Chavez's acts were a betrayal of people who looked to him as a leader they trusted, and many who they revered. Those women, men, and children were and are the backbone of the courageous movement for decent pay and conditions, civil rights, and human dignity in the fields. These recent revelations have only begun to uncover the truth of the experiences of what survivors faced and had to deal with and still do. The speakers today are Chicana and Latina veteranas who represent that struggle for justice of the past and also today's present fight. We will hear their stories. We will listen to what went wrong. We will learn of their current activism to defend workers from harassment and build union democracy and safe work sites. We hope these discussions will guide our unions and organizations on how to prevent such abuses from happening anywhere ever again. For those who need help right now, we are posting links in the chat for people suffering sexual abuse, including a page to report directly to the UFW. Our panel speakers today are DESIREE Rojas, Marta COTERA, and YOLANDA ALANIZ. Our first speaker, and then for each speaker, I'll give you a little wave when time is about to come up, but I'll give you a wave, but okay. First speaker, DESIREE Rojas is the daughter of Albert and Elena Rojas, who were farm workers and prominent organizers of the United Farm Workers. They worked alongside Filipino farm worker leader, Filipino worker leader Larry E. Leong as the Delano grape boycott gained traction in 1965. Desiree and her family were radical critics of bad policies taken by UFW beginning in the 1970s, and they paid a heavy price as dissidents. Desiree is currently the vice president of the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement in Sacramento and board member of Albert M. Rojas Foundation. There is a link in the chat for that. Please welcome Desiree.
Gracias a todos. I want to say thank you very much for having me on this panel. I'd like to first point out, thank you for acknowledging my mother, Elena Rojas. Often, because my father organized longer and up until months before he died, his last campaign was the Driscoll boycott out of San Quintin, Baja California, Mexico. Often my dad is more talked about, of course, naturally, than my mother, but my mother, in her own right, was an amazing UFW organizer who was on the front line with her children, who got arrested with her children, and slept on the same union halls with her children. So, gracias for mentioning my mother. I would like to say that it is a very devastating time right now for my family. And one hand, the heavy weight and the of knowing of these deep, heavily betrayal of my family, of my sister, of my family, um, and uh, and also the freedom that comes with it to say, "Ya basta, it's over, it's out." It comes with a very deep pain, devastation, and right now we're all in healing. We are taking care of each other. But for me, part of my feeling of healing is also speaking on the issue of women in labor, like today. I'd like to point out first that, in my opinion, it is very important that we begin in this discussion by correcting the UFW history. Um, it is a misconception. It's a romantic story uh, with a narrative that promotes and that makes Cesar Chavez the core of the movimiento for many, many years was a very huge mistake that happened. And it was a wrong thing to do to center him as the movimiento. The movimiento was always about farm workers. It was about rank and file. And the important part of history that needs to be corrected is about the merge. It is a misconception that Chavez was the founder of the United Farm Workers. That is not true. In 1965, of course, everyone knows about the march, the famous march that took place from Delano to Sacramento. When you look at those acronyms of UFW, OC, and NFWA, it's representing the three organizations: the independent UFW, United Farm Workers Union, that was founded by Oscar Gonzalez out of San Jose, and Al Rojas in Oxnard, California, began organizing farm workers and signing farm workers up as members and already signing contracts from San Jose to Coachella. At the same time, the AFL-CIO created AWOC committees all over the country, but in this case in Delano, under Larry Ilong and under Ben Gines and Andy Amutan. Philip Veracruz came after the merge, but they represented the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee. Those two were tied to the AFL-CIO. They were labor, they were inside the arena of labor. The National Farm Workers Association was a nonprofit, 401c3, That is the association that Chavez and Huerta and Gilbert Padilla, Tony Orendin were working out of in Delano. There was a merge, and in this merge took off with the national Great Boycott. But we all know that the Great Boycott and the strikes came out of the Filipino movement under Lariat Ilang. He started this movimiento while the West Coast movimiento was happening under the Independent United Farm Workers Union. So this history needs to be corrected. And for some reason, Cesar did not want to acknowledge my father and Oscar Gonzalez's union as being a player, as being emerging to form the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee that took the National Great Boycott nationwide. My parents were in Pittsburgh. We arrived there with $50, one phone number, and with the expectation of to find housing, which was donated by the diocese, and we lived off of donated food from the community and from various unions. The poverty was very heavy, but I would have to say the poverty was worse when we returned from the Great Boycott and lived in La Paz. But after that, of course, my parents went on to Poplar and Yolo County on farm worker strikes and campaigns. This history is very important because it shows that my parents and my family had 100% faith and believed in what we were doing. My parents believed that they were building a farm workers union controlled by rank and file farm workers. But this wasn't the case. This isn't what happened. It's very known that Larry Itilong and my father were kicked out of the union. But I believe, like many, that if there was a structure in place, committees in place that conducted oversight, that gave the power to the hands of the rank and file farm workers, especially women, I believe that there would have been oversight that could have prevented this from happening. And of course, after the New York Times article dropped, it was very devastating. It was very hard on my family. And I have to say that all the victims involved stepping up and coming out were our heroes. And absolutely, we should all be supporting the victims, especially for reparations. But also rethinking even the entirety of March 31st needs to happen as well. We need to rethink a different date. We need to rethink what this should look like and put the power back into the movimiento of the farm workers. I come from migrant farm workers. My great grandparents were migrant farm workers, and my great grandparents and my grandparents and my great uncles, some of which were caught up in the Mexican repatriation of between 1929 and 1936. It's a horrifying part of our history, like what's happening today with ICE. But my point is that my parents were migrant farm workers. Lariat Ilang was migrant farm workers who understood the day in the life of being a farm worker, who understood that women, farm workers, were being accosted in the fields and, fighting for the human rights of farm workers, from bathrooms to decent wages and to the civil rights and human rights, were absolutely the reasons why they devoted their lives. We devoted our lives to this movimiento. But in essence, um, in essence, uh, today in unions, it is very, very important in every union structure that to prevent something like this from happening, there must be rank and power power inside of each union that is the oversight of what is happening inside of the union. There's no doubt that this romantic narrative, romantic narrative has hurt our people. Mi madre es Chicana, yo soy Chicana. We're tied to many tribes, Zacatecan, Apache, Pueblo, Purepecha, we have relatives tied to Tule and to California Miwoks. You know, we understand our roots. And como mi papá muchas veces would say, no somos inmigrantes, somos los originales de nuestra tierra. We stand on our land. We are not illegal aliens. You know, we stand on our land, and today we're fighting back the same patriarchal control that has become a normality that we are fighting back against, and also, of course, the policies that that enslave our people and workers, like NAFTA did, and like the modern day indentured servitude H-2A program, which is a slave workers program. And of course, there's a lot of concerns in the future about that, about where we're going with in labor with farm workers. But for women, it is very, very important that we change this romantic narrative for the future generations to understand that building this movimiento, there was nothing romantic about it. There's nothing glorious about it. There was a lot of pain and suffering, a lot of poverty. We lived off of $5 a week, begging.
Desiree, you have
Right. Yeah,
1 minute, Desiree.
okay,
1 minute. You're good.
out on the huelgas, begging for food and shelter to survive. My parents were zealots in this movement, but staying united right now today is also very important, like having these discussions. And so I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there, pero again, correcting the UFW history is very important today.
Gracias, Desiree. Thank you so much for your words, for your declarations. The next speaker is Marta COTERA. Marta COTERA is joining us from Austin, Texas, is a civil rights activist and a nationally recognized scholar of Chicana feminism. Also wrote a book called Chicana Feminist, which I don't have. Okay. And archivist of the Chicano movement. She is a founder of La Raza Unida Party, a radical 1970s third party. She was a founder of Mujeres Pro Raza Unida and of the national state and of the national and the state. And she was also, and a part of the Austin Women's Political Caucus. She helped open Austin Rape Crisis Center in 1974 and the Center for Battered Women in 1977. Please welcome Marta COTERA.
Muchas gracias. And Desiree, thank you so much for your words. There's so much history that always remains untold. No matter what we try to escape, we always end up with great men, great women, history, and it doesn't do anybody any good, because then it's hard to change. It's hard to draw past. And what we're doing today, I really appreciate the work that the organizers have done. Muchos como Yolanda, Helen, they're camaradas of decades and decades and decades of work. And I feel like all of us are still in the trenches. Thank you for everybody coming today. I feel like we will eventually, like the Llorona, allí, in the future, again. And my relation today would be más bien testimonio of what we did within our own organizations, the interactions that we did have, of course, with the Texas Farm Worker organizing, and also with the UFW, very limited on our part, but not so much from the Texas farm workers that we work with. So it'll be more of a testimonial of what Raza Unida attempted to do. And I think pretty much was successful in doing with regards to the issue of sexual abuse, empowering the women and the children and families in the movement. So our family's involvement was in education and in politics. We have found college, independent college in South Texas. We went to work in Crystal City so we could advance the movement, for rural and urban communities. We also worked, like I said, as founders of the Raza Unida Party, third party, attempts that have had wonderful results in that so many of our legacy Raza Unida participants are now in más bien in local politics throughout Texas. We are also proud founders of the Mexican American Latino Studies program department at the University of Texas, which is being dismantled. So right now, that's a big struggle that we've got, underfoot in Texas, a big, major struggle. The political struggle that continues. In politics, in 1970, we participated in founding the Raza Unida Party. We were, by then, we started in Austin, but we were in Crystal City working with Jose Angel Gutierrez.
Marta, please speak slower.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's okay.
And Virginia and other leaders.
Norma, since we don't have Juisa, maybe you can give Martha another couple of minutes too.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just slower.
Okay, I will do that. Our work as a party, of course, was with urban and rural communities with a particular focus on farm worker and migrant families throughout the state, including a very close work and association with the Texas Farm Workers Union, TFWU, which involved Antonio Orendain and Raquel Orendain. Now, Antonio Orendain had worked with farm working organization in California. So he had a long, association and history with that. So he was very well positioned to lead the farm worker movement in Texas and to make the decisions that Raquel ultimately made with regards to the movement. So it's our privilege and honor to work with them as they were very close participants with Raza Unida. So the Texas, in my looking in, and I'm not an expert, I said I was very close to Antonio and Raquel, and especially with Raquel in organizing and the women to support both the farm worker movement and the party. So my observation was that the Texas and the California farm worker unions were very different. UFW, as you have addressed, Desiree, was associated or part of AFL-CIO organization, while the Texas Farm Worker Union never really became part of that. They never could come to terms with being part of the same. In my observation, it continued to be a grassroots farm worker union that achieved, of course, tremendously important benefits for farm workers in Texas. As bad as we are, believe me, we're much better off than we were before the union. And to credit, you have to, a lot of this similar benefits are modeled, on the UFW, on what the UFW was also working. So we modeled that, acknowledged that, both were very effective organizations. Raquel and Antonio were very active in the Chicano movement and also affiliates of the Unida Party, very important part of the party. Despite the difference in the unions in Texas, we continued, of course, to support the struggle of California, the California Union with regards to boycotts, rallies, legislative advocacy, and other action. And César Chávez, who was a frequent visitor to us, in fact, I myself have a photo, everybody, has a photo with César, was a frequent visitor to our state, and he was welcomed by civil rights leader. Being veteran activist, we knew that he was symbolic. That, he represented the movement and we supported the movement. 100%. And the benefits are behalf. Gender equity and women's liberation, there was great differences between the union. Our Texas Farm Worker Union, Raza Unida Party organizers involved the same women and men. We focused on rural areas. So, for example, Alma Canales, who was the RUP candidate for lieutenant governor, was a very important writer for the Kawamil, the union newspaper in Texas. And so the Kawamil very often included writings on Chicana feminism, our activism, and our organizing. And so it was used as a vehicle to empower, families and women. And Raquel, specifically, I worked closely with her, was a critic of UFW's indifference on women's development and women's issues. History will never record this, but that difference was a very important issue on why it was difficult to integrate. I mean, I know that for a fact because I worked very closely with Raquel and with the women that were organized in South Texas and West Texas and in the Winter Garden area, and including Central Texas. From its founding, the Raza Unida Party, and again, keep in mind that it was largely rural at that point. It was later the urban core came in, the urban participants came in. But from its founding, the party adopted practices and policies supporting liberation and equal rights for all, regardless of gender. Then women gained leadership positions, and hundreds ran for political office, including myself. I ran for State Board of Education. Marilena Martinez, our state chair from 1976 on, was the first woman elected to lead a political party in the country. As far as I know, I need to check the history of the Progressive Party, but I believe she was the first woman. And the Democratic Party, believe it or not, took notice and opened up a whole lot for women because of what we did. So how do we do this? Because I think that's important to know. Well, from founding, Raza Unida adopted policies and practices support liberation unconditionally. And this was promoted by women, including yours truly here and my husband, not only just women, but men who were progressive and forward-looking and knew that their issues were best advanced if women were given a voice. We could double our, his passion was housing, and a lot of women, their passion was childcare, health, and we saw that if women were not included in the decision-making, policy-making, then why have a party? If we couldn't have advance our political issues, like why have a union if I can't advance benefits for farm workers? So we were the same way. And so we wanted the party to be beyond, much taking a stand and pruning and parading on stages. We wanted a real party. And so that's why we pressed for this, not only a statement of fact, but practices. And of course, this was promoted by women and men as a priority value because we were a party operating within the Chicano movement. Of course, we got the same argument that Dolores Huerta uses to protect UFW's reputation. This argument was that if women were liberated and empowered, except already in leadership positions, even the trad wives today use that. I mean, they want women to go back to the home, except them. They want their nannies to do the work at home, and they're out there with the men. So that, they felt that if women were, empowered and liberated for the groupies and women already in leadership positions, then the party and the Chicano movement itself would be divided. This is the argument they gave us, which is what Dolores referenced, would be divided and destroyed. And you know what we said? We responded that it was neither logical nor reasonable to participate and to bring our families into any part of the Chicano movement that did not acknowledge and practice liberation as a priority. After all, that was a movement's purpose. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You either have it or you're not in a movement. Then not only did we say that, but we made it happen. We did the hard work while we're doing the party's work, organizing the party, learning party, party strategies and the legal stuff and all. We also formed Raza Unida Women's Caucus. We organized local and statewide training, consciousness raising on liberationist practices, alliance forums, political strategies. We use the freedom socialist literature.
And Marta, you have 1 minute.
Okay. So we did the hard work of organizing. So of course, I'm not, never finished. I always do a third of what I wanted to do. But the main point that I wanted to make is that along with the Farm Workers Union, we succeeded in growing our party, and we succeeded in our party platform to look at all addressing the issue of liberation for women. We also put the men on notice, because you have empowered women and families, then you don't have any marginalized, and you don't have people that are unprotected, and so especially in that and so all of this consciousness raising and awareness, I think made our party very successful. The protection of women and children that were part of the party and of the movement. And later on, we can talk about LGBTQ if you have any questions, because this also gave us an opening. This provided an opening for gender differences to come to the forefront, and helped our members develop LGBTQIA organizations in Austin and in Texas.
Excellent. Gracias, Marta.
Igualmente.
Okay, our last speaker is Yolanda ALANIZ. She is a co-author of Viva la Raza, A History of Chicano Identity and Resistance, which includes important chapters on the UFW and the Raza Unida Party. From her experience as a farm worker in Eastern Washington to being president of United Workers Union Independent at the University of Washington, her leadership continues as a longtime member in Radical Women and our sister organization, the Freedom Socialist Party. She is currently defending immigrant rights in the Committee for Self-Defense in Los Angeles. And she also wrote Radical Women's statement on the Chavez abuses. She was also a student leader in her campus during the 1960s and 70s. Please welcome Yolanda ALANIZ.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here. It's so great to see so many people and such friendly faces, and I'm honored to be on the same panel with Desiree and Martha. Of course, I met Martha, in the 70s when she was a speaker for National Radical Women when we had our national conference in Santa Monica, and I was still living in Seattle. So we maintain our friendship, and I hope to continue my friendship now with Desiree, who I've met through this. So I'm really glad. And Desiree, you're in California, so we should definitely hang out, as they say. My statement is listed, I think, in the chat. Rewriting the Chavez legacy, male chauvinism, and lack of union democracy led to abuses. So the main point in this document or the statement is that César Chávez ran the union as a, I wanted to say, I want to compare it to President Trump, frankly. No democracy. His word was the last word. He ran out the radicals, the Filipinos that Desiree mentioned, who started the union because a lot of them were communist. He ran out even people who weren't radicals, but just wanted to contradict him or criticize him. So all that accumulated to a lack of democracy, and for him to have ultimate power with no criticism, there was no checks and balances. So of course he could get away with grooming and raping women and young girls. There was no one to stand in his way. So that's the lesson here. Democracy is vital to any movement. It's vital to any union. Without democracy, you know, you don't have a movement. You can't really self-correct. You can't have the right policies made or the right leadership in place. So anyway, read the statement, because that's not what I'm going to talk about. Okay, let me tell you what I'm going to talk about. I'm interweaving a lot of my history with the Chicano movement, with UFW, and then also addressing the sexual abuse. Let me see how far I can get on this. I think it's too long. When I was about 14 years old, living in Sunnyside, Washington, in the heart of the Yakima Valley, eastern part of Washington State, I decided I should probably quit school and help my family by working in the fields like all the other Chicanos were doing, especially the men. They were dropping high school and getting into the fields. Well, my mom knows me, right? She knew me very well. She said yes, I would say no. She said no, I would say yes. You know, typical teenager response. So she says, okay, let's work together this summer. And if you still want to quit, okay. Well, she had me working like a dog from, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. working in the fields, which is hard work, as Desiree and Martha, I'm sure, know, and even Norma with her ancestors. It's a very physical work, and that's why I think I have so many back problems to this day, like my mom did. So I still was in charge of making dinner at home. I still was in charge of cleaning the house on the weekends, doing the family laundry. So nothing was taken off my plate. So at the end of the summer, she says, okay, if you quit school, this will be your life the rest of your life. And not only that, it will be your children's life. Do you still want to quit school? I said, no, please, I'm going back to school. So because of her encouragement, I was able to go to the University of Washington through the Equal Opportunity Program. They actually recruited me to go to the UW. And then when I moved to California, I was able to go to grad school and get my master in library science and archives. So let's see, where am I? So for the Chicanos who left the barrio and came to the UW, we were the second wave of Chicanos. There was 40 already there. We added another 40, so there was 80 of us, and thousands of students. We were segregated into Lander Hall, which was our Chicano floor. And so when we started protesting against the Vietnam War, we had, pretty much self-contained movement already, because we were already on the Chicano floor. So we protested the Vietnam War, bringing ROTC on campus. We took over freeways, took over buildings. We fought the cops. We ran them off. We hid in the bathrooms when they chased us, the women's bathroom. Anyway, so I was all part of that. And I didn't know anything about Marx or the class struggle or anything like that. But I learned from being involved in the Chicano student movement was that when all of us went on strike, this is in the 70s, we all went on strike, the faculty, students, and staff. And we were in negotiations with the union bureaucrats and the president. And the faculty sold us out. They agreed behind our back. And we had our demands, which were never met. So I learned from that even Chicanos can betray you, right? That's something, because before that, I thought I was in my little bubble of race antagonisms. The white growers were the bosses. They were the enemy. The Chicanos, we were the workers. We were the ones oppressed. And that was my world. But when I met radical women on campus and then went through this experience, I realized there's a class struggle going on. And I remember being at Old Freeway Hall in Seattle and asking Gloria Martin, who was the organizer and helped create Radical Women. I asked her, I didn't know much. And I said, what is the class struggle? Everybody uses that term. And she said, we have the haves and the have-nots. And there's antagonism between the two, because the rich want to get richer and the poor want, get rid of those bosses, get rid of the ruling class. And that's the antagonism. That's the class struggle. I said, oh, okay, I know that. Okay. So anyway, so it was, Gloria was so funny about giving examples like my mom did. Let's see, where am I? Let's see. During the height of the Chicano movement, I was very much involved with supporting United Farm Workers struggle, boycotting grapes and boycotting Safeway, boycotting lettuce. So the Chicano movement was really anchored in the United Farm Workers struggle. And of course, it was very encompassing. We were all dedicated to that. We had most of the US people not buying grapes and lettuce. I remember still to this day, it's very hard for me to buy grapes and lettuce, right? Because there was a lot of backing for that. My mom was a community organizer. So when she organized a rally against Safeway and César Chávez came to Sunnyside or to the Yakima Valley, I was little, but mom was organizing it. I remember the story that mom told me was that my stepdad, Esteban Tanguma, he was working for a farmer. He had started as an irrigation worker, rose up to be a mechanic, then rose up to be able to work the combines and the heavy equipment. So he always had a job even during the winter, which was very lucky for a farm worker. And so the bosses went to Steve and said, Esteban, you got to talk to Nympha. You got to tell her to call this off. And he says, Martha, this is the story I wanted you to hear. He says, have you tried talking to my wife? Have you tried telling her what to do? Nympha doesn't listen to me. You try it. Well, it wasn't called off and mom didn't listen. So that was that.
Yeah.
I'm skipping some stuff here. So, so when you read, oh, where's my book? Oh, I must have left it upstairs. When you read Viva la Raza, A History of Chicano Identity and Resistance. There we go. Thank you, Norma. Please read the section on United Farm Workers. It really goes into a lot of detail of reference what Desiree said, reference what Martha says. So I'm not going to go over all of that because it's too much to cover. But the point is, we have brave women on the front lines right now. We always have. History, I remember coming home and Mom, I'm a Chicana, I'm an activist. And she goes, what does that mean? And I would tell her, and she says, oh, we've had Mexicanas always in leadership, always in the fight. You know, she talked about all the women in the Mexican Revolution. Then I would come home weeks later, Mom, I'm a socialist. I'm a member of the Radical Women. And she goes, oh, we have socialists in our blood. And she would talk about all the communists she knew. Anyway, so we never talked about me being a lesbian. That's something you just don't talk about. But she would, when I would bring my girlfriends home, she would put us in the same bedroom. So it was kind of like this silent pact that we had. But she knew, I knew, everyone knew. So when I ran for Seattle City Council, I remember after I went from the general to the primary election, the city council, I was the first Chicana city employee to run. And I told my daughter after the campaign, I said, you know, when I run next time, I'm going to say I'm a lesbian, because I didn't, because you know, I was threatened by her father and I didn't want to have any custody issues. So I didn't come out then, but I told her I'm going to come out next time. She said, Mom, everybody knew. Okay. Okay. Especially running with Heidi. Heidi was always putting her arm around me and kissing me. So Heidi was the other person running from our party on City Hall. And so they always thought that we were a couple. Anyway, I want to talk about what can be done when we have sexual abuse. We all know that it's a power trip by men, right? It's a one of controlling. But where do they get that? The system is ingrained in that. Capitalism thrives on putting down women and misusing them and using them. That's, you know, it feeds off the sexism and the racism and the transphobia and homophobia. All of that builds up capitalism, because we're the cheap labor, right? And we don't believe biology is destiny. We believe women have always been leaders in their movement, and we are standing up against sexual abuse. Women are showing their power and their voice with the Me Too movement, even before that. And the Epstein files all those women that testified, I mean, you listen to them and you just feel so much for them, especially when they released their names and they thought they were going to be not released.
And you have 1 minute, Yolanda.
Thank you. So I call for, like, we need a general strike. That's one thing. I think if we all got together and made demands of sexual abuse be stopped, that the bosses have a responsibility to keep women safe. We need a united front. All of us in the movement right now, we need to come together and make demands that protect women and children. And ultimately, we need to frickin' get rid of this system that oppresses us. I'm a revolutionary. I'm a socialist for a good reason, because I finally realized we can fight and stay up all night worrying about all the ills and freaking stuff that's around us, the hunger strikes that are going on in Adelanto and New York. I mean, these people, I mean, I could cry tears all night for them. But that's not what we need. We need a revolution in this country. We need everyone to step up and become a revolutionary. It's high time. If we all did it, if we all committed to making a revolution in this country, all those hours that we're spending on all this other stuff that we're doing just to keep our survival going, we could cut that. And just, so last word, please check us out on radicalwomen.org and socialism.com. And that's what we need, people to step up to the plate. There's no more time. We don't have any more time. We've got fascism knocking at our door. We got to unite, and we need everyone to step up to the plate to become revolutionaries and get rid of this frickin' system. Thank you.
Yep.
Gracias, Yolanda, so much. Thank you, all panelists. There's so many intersections that we've discussed, and I'm sure that folks, we have 122 participants. Realistically, we can't